Alrighty, chat, let's get started. How's everybody doing today? Uh-oh, something fell. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. Happy Monday, everybody. We are now in the month of February, and just a reminder that Dr. K wrote a book, How to Raise a Healthy Gamer. So, we have a cool announcement to make. So I wrote a book about raising kids in the digital age and how to raise your kids in a way that helps them develop a healthy relationship with technology. And if you already have a kid who has a problem with technology or a loved one, like significant other or, friend, brother, sibling, what have you, some of the techniques in the book will also work. So the book comes out on March 12th. And so we actually have a couple of cool things that we're doing. So if you pre-order the book, you get access to a couple of things. One is you get a sneak peek of a chapter from the book on audio, read by yours truly. You also get a parent workbook if you pre-order right now. So that's understanding your child's gaming type. And then we're going to do a special Q&A for people who have pre-ordered the book. So we'll answer questions if y'all pre-order, and then you have any questions about gaming stuff. We will do a live Q&A on the 11th. Yeah, so definitely check it out. We have a book that is out now, or not out now. It gets released in 1 month exactly. And today we're going to be doing stuff sort of relevant to that. So we're going to be talking about parenting kids with ADHD. So let's get started. And it's available anywhere where y'all can, order books. So I'm super excited today. So this is kind of interesting. So, we talk about, so a lot of what I share comes from my personal experience, right? So there's the psychiatry, and then there's the neuroscience, and then there's the spirituality. But part of the reason I wrote this book is because I'm a parent now. And today we're going to be talking a lot about parenting kids in the digital age and parenting kids with ADHD. So it's so fascinating to see how difficult it is to raise a kid with ADHD and some of the workarounds that I've kind of had to figure out. So it's taken everything that I've learned from India, neuroscience, psychiatry, whatever, to even raise my own kids in this digital age. And one of my kids is probably neurodiverse. So there's a lot of challenges out there that parents really struggle with when it comes to raising kids, especially with ADHD. But what I've sort of found is that if you really understand what ADHD is and how it works, then you can adjust your parenting style, and then it ends up so much smoother. So we're going to kind of get into that. Spoilers from the book. So the book has 4 sections. The first section is about understanding the impact of technology addiction on your child. So what does technology do to their brain? What does their technology do to their psychology? Part 2 is about building an alliance, because you can't be sober for someone else. So this is something I learned the hard way. So when you're an addiction psychiatrist, you can't convince someone to be sober. They have to want to do it themselves. Now, in the case of gaming, we don't necessarily need sobriety, but you can't have a gamer who doesn't want to be a healthy gamer. You can't force it on them, right? So they have to decide for themselves, hey, these games are not moving my life in the direction that I want them to go. And this is where I think one of the things that we explain pretty well, which is very confusing to parents, is that many people will look at a gamer or husband, wife, whatever, sibling, and they'll be stunned because you tell this person, hey, I think your gaming is causing problems. But then the person, no matter how hard you try to explain it to them, how much logic you use, they just push back over and over and over again. And the reason is because if you're a gamer whose life is falling apart, on a subconscious level, it's falling apart. If your life is falling apart, you are trying very, very hard to suppress that fact. And people who point out to you that you are screwing up your life will actually trigger your psychological defense mechanisms and you will deny the obvious. So this is where if you sort of look at it, right, there are a lot of people out there, you can look in like political spheres and things like that, that are clearly in the wrong. But the more clearly they are in the wrong, the more they insist that they are correct. So the book dives into sort of how to build an alliance and sort of the psychology of like how to show people or how to create a space where someone feels like they can admit that they made a mistake. And once they admit that gaming is a problem, then y'all can work in a positive direction, right? So it's not that they can't see it, Katyscape. It's that they try really hard not to see it. They can see it, but it's not even as simple. It's not even as simple as like, oh, they can't see it. It's not a lack of ability. It's actually in the opposite direction where they are trying really hard not to see it. And so this is what's so confusing about parents. They're like, oh my God, I don't understand. Like, how does this kid not realize? No, they're trying very hard. They realize. And they realize so well that they're trying really hard to disprove what they already know. And so you're kind of approaching it with the completely kind of opposite energy. It causes them to be defensive, dig in their heels, and not admit that they have a problem. So weapons grade copium, well said. Right? So how do you get around that kind of stuff? So I know this is a little bit strange because this book isn't, arguably for our core community, but that's actually changing because the average age of people in our community is like 32. A lot of people have kids now. We have some people in their 60s that watch our content, which is awesome. For those of y'all that are a little bit older, welcome to the club. And the other thing is that some of the skills in this book, even if they don't apply to the parent-child, even if if you don't have a parent-child relationship, they absolutely apply to communication with other people. So if y'all are having trouble, like in general with communication and building healthy relationships, that's a big part of what this book is about. Okay? All right. Let's dive in. Oh, is there a video where he talks about anxiety caused by thinking about death? Not specifically, but y'all should definitely check out our first interview with Ethan Evans. So he is an awesome dude, and we talk a lot about that. This is like 3 years ago, but check it out. Okay. All right. So let's dive in. Got good ones, chat. Okay. Hold on. This doesn't look right. Oh, there it is. Whew. Scrolling. Dr. K needs to scroll. Okay. Give me just 1 second, chat. Let me get set up. Okay. All right. I love this one. Okay. So, how to limit iPad use. Hi. So my 4.5-year-old got an iPad for Christmas from mother-in-law. Me and the wife limit it to 1 hour a day, but she is obsessed with this iPad and the texting feature and insists on texting the mother-in-law whom just entered her life at Christmas. She was absent since birth due to other issues. How can I limit my daughter from iPad use before I throw it away completely? Okay. So, this is a very classic example. So, grandparent, whose job it is to spoil their child, especially when grandparent has been absent, right? So the grandparent has been absent. So sometimes when you have a kid and they have some kind of caregiver or parenting figure who doesn't do a great job, either they're a little bit absent or maybe they yell or maybe they drink or something else. Maybe they're trying to win over your child's affection, right? Because they're trying to get their own emotional needs met. We'll give the child an iPad or some other kind of technological advice. Now, this is what's really unfortunate. So when grandparents or other caregivers do this, what they're basically doing is, as one of my mentors once put it, they are shitting the bed and letting someone else clean it up. So when you give a child a technological device, they love you. It is a way of buying affection. And the other thing that you're doing is you're making the parents a bad guy, because now you get to give the child the iPad, right? So the child loves it. And then the parents are the ones who have to institute limits. So you're like, here, take some crack cocaine or opium or heroin. Take something that makes up for all of the guilt that I feel for being absent from the first part of your life, or I'm trying to bribe your affection through giving you something that you want. And by the way, it is my job to spoil them. This is the situation that we face, right? Because grandparents oftentimes don't realize that these are highly addictive substances. So I want you all to just think about this for a second, right? Is it okay as a grandparent to be like, man, I'm feeling guilty because I've been absent from my grandchild's life for a little while, and I want them to love me. Oh, and the little one loves crack cocaine so much. They love heroin so much. Let me just give them some heroin. Here, I'm going to give you a pile of heroin that you can use every single day. And by the way, I'm going to text you and you can text me, so let's use the heroin together. Such amazing grandparent-child bonding. So the first thing is that we as a society need to normalize having conversations with people who give gifts before they give technology. See, gift giving is great. You give it as a surprise. No one really knows what you're giving. Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay? It's great. Like you give someone a gift and it's a surprise. Oh my God, they open it. They're so happy. They had no idea. But now we live in a society where if you give the wrong gift, the gifts can be harmful, right? So we don't like gift people vape pens. Like, oh, like little Timmy is 7. Let me gift him a vape pen, right? You don't do that. So this is something that absolutely needs to happen. If you are a parent or you are a grandparent or you are an uncle, aunt, sibling, whatever, always talk to the parents before you give someone a technological device. Because they're the ones that have to institute limits. They're the ones that have to fight with the child. They're the ones that have to prevent the technological device from harming their child. So as a parent, this is also something you should do, where you need to normalize having conversations with gift givers and say, hey, if you're ever thinking about giving the kids some kind of technology, y'all need to clear it with us first. We're working really hard to set healthy limits around device usage, okay? So like, I know this is kind of confusing because we normally don't clear gifts before we give them. So I want y'all to think about device giving kind of like gifting a pet. You just don't gift someone a pet because it's a huge responsibility, right? You can't just be like, hey, I got you a dog. Good luck. No, you need to clear it with them first. Make sure that they can handle it. And technology falls into this category. So this is also like, okay. Does that make sense? The other thing that we have to understand is that as a parent, even though you should be having these conversations, the other thing that you should absolutely be doing is working with your child to develop healthy technology habits. And so if you have a plan in place to teach your child a healthy relationship with an iPad, then it's okay if someone gives you an iPad because you already have the infrastructure in place to manage the iPad, set limits, whatever. So this is a common problem that we also see with parents where they're like, oh my God, like we're not working on like developing a healthy relationship with technology. Therefore, someone randomly gives us a gift and it creates all kinds of problems. As parents, we need to expect that our children will be exposed to technology at some point. It's not good enough that you haven't given it to them, right? So this is where, as parents, what we want to do is prepare our kids for the world that they're going to live in. And preparing our kids for the world that they're going to live in means preparing them for a world with technology. And so how do you teach a child how to have a healthy relationship with technology? You give them access to technology and start to build up a healthy relationship. What does that mean? So this means something as simple as, okay, let's talk a little bit about technology usage. When do you want to use? How much do you want to use? What effect does it have on your mind? What effect does it have on your mood? Let's talk about when we're going to use, when we're not going to use. What do you enjoy about it? What do you not enjoy about it? This is everything that we have in the book, right? So this is all in here. So how to have conversations with your kids so that they understand. So I'll give you all an example of something that I do with my children. So my kids wake up, not anymore, but they used to wake up and they used to want to watch TV the first thing in the morning, right? It's the weekend, let's have fun. Because I had this idea that when I was growing up and on the weekend, like I would wake up and watch cartoons and play video games, and like that's what I did on the weekend. So I was like, okay, the weekend is for fun. The difference is that when I was growing up, there was a limit to how many cartoons I could watch because they weren't on demand, right? So the cartoon happens, it happens from a certain time to a certain time. They start around 7 a.m. and they end around 11 or noon, and then they like don't really have good cartoons in the afternoon. So I was limited. The problem is that right now, kids are not limited, right? So if they watch something on their on-demand video service, right, they can watch for like literally 24 hours a day for 365 days a year, and they'll never run out of stuff to watch. So the standards that I grew up with don't apply anymore. So I was like, okay, let me indulge my kids and let them watch on the weekend. But then I realized that this was causing a lot of problems. And so now what I do is when I wake up, we sort of wake up and then we say, okay, do you want to watch? Let's pay attention to ourselves. How much do you enjoy the first 30 minutes? How much do you enjoy the next 30 minutes? Do you want to take a break? Let's take a break anyway. And then I'm going to ask you in 30 minutes after taking a break whether you really wish you had kept watching or you're having fun. So we'll go to the playground or something like that, and then I'll ask them in half an hour, hey, do you want to go home and continue watching, or are you having fun with your friends? They're like, no, we want to stay. Okay. Now they understand that stopping watching at some point can help them have fun. So this is kind of the approach that we want to take with our kids, is like you have to start setting healthy technology limits at a young age. And a big part of that is encouraging your child to pay attention to themselves. And then asking them, hey, if we watch for 1 hour versus 2 hours, is the second hour just as fun as the first hour? And if you raise awareness of these things with your children, they will naturally start to realize, okay, technology is fun, but other stuff is fun too. There is a diminishing return on technology usage. And the one simple thing, the most important lesson you can teach your child if you want to prepare them for a world of invasive technology is that there is diminishing returns on usage. This is the most important lesson. Once your child understands there are diminishing returns on their technology usage, they will naturally start to reduce their usage up to a healthy amount, right? They'll be able to pay attention and start to see. I know it sounds unbelievable, but you work on it for a few months. By the way, this isn't like a 1 week or 2 week thing. Okay, this is like 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, where you're asking them to pay attention. Let's experiment. Let's have 1 day with tech and 1 day without tech, or less tech, more tech, and you tell me which day you enjoyed. Ask them to notice and reflect at the end of the day. Did you have fun today? Do you want to do this again next week? And they're kids, right? So which means they're vulnerable to their dopamine, which means that if they're at the playground, they don't want to quit the playground to go home and play on technology. They're like, I want to do this forever. I don't ever want to go home, right? So you can play into that. Okay, questions? Okay. All right. Let's move on. Is that good? Y'all have questions? Yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff. So at what age are kids old enough to start doing this? So I do this when they're like 4 or 5. It depends on the kid. But like even a 4-year-old can start to make some kind of choice. And that's the big thing, is that the earlier you start with this, just like anything else, right? If you teach your 4-year-old to play chess or play a musical instrument, they will be better at it by the time they're 9. And so the moment that they have some degree of self-awareness and they can pay attention to their signals, you can start with this. So what if he says he wants to go back and watch? Then I would say you can let them do that, right? So then you can sort of still let them do that. And you can go back and you can say, okay, let's go back and watch and let's see how you feel. And then if they go back and watch and they say, okay, this is all I want to do, right? So even in the worst case scenario, this is all I ever want to do ever. That's when you can say as a parent, That's not acceptable. So I understand that all you want to do is watch, but my responsibility as a parent is to help you be well-rounded. So here are the things, and we'll get to this more, here are the things that you need to do every day. You need to have some amount of social activity, you need to have some amount of physical activity, you need to do some amount of chores. So if you want to watch all day, the second you get all of this stuff done, then you can watch. And what you will actually find is that as long as you kind of lay it out like that and sort of make sure that you kind of play the game the way that the kid does. So meet the kid where he's at. So if the kid says, all I ever want to do is watch and none of the awareness stuff seems to work, that's okay. You still want to teach them and prepare them for life that if you want to spend all your weekends playing video games, as an adult, you still have responsibilities. So let's take care of your responsibilities first, and then you can play. Okay. Does that technique work on adults as well? Absolutely. So this is where I encourage you all to pay attention to your technology usage. So let's say you browse your choice of social media or internet content aggregator, Reddit or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, right? So like the first 15 minutes that you browse whatever your feed is, it's like pretty fun. But like when you're going on hour number 3, you're just like looking for something else to make the boredom go away. It's not even fun anymore. No one wakes up on a given day and is like, man, I can't wait to browse Reddit for 14 hours at a stretch. No one says that. And what you'll find, and so this is important to understand, what you'll find is that the less you use technology, the more enjoyable it actually is. Because you'll develop something called dopaminergic tolerance. So there are diminishing returns to each, hour of the game that you play. Okay. How would that not just lead them to half-ass everything that you would impose on them just to be able to play? Yeah, that's so then you make sure that the threshold is full-assing it, right? So if it's not an acceptable level of performance, then they have to do it again. And we'll get to that. So let's move on. Okay. All right, so we're going to move things around a little bit. Okay. Okay. Let's look at the next one. So this is great. So a lot of y'all's questions I hope will be answered here. At my wit's end with a 9-year-old boy ignoring basic requests. I'm working on getting an official diagnosis for my son who's 9. In the meantime, I'm trying to alter his environment to make his life easier. However, he fights me on every little thing. He clearly needs structure, but when I try to do that for him, he fights it. He's been arguing with me whenever I ask him to do something simple. Today, after finishing his homework, I told him he needed to put his paper in his folder and put the folder in his book bag because he has a habit of shoving things in his book bag and then he can't find anything. He proceeds to immediately stuff the paper into his book bag. I asked him why he did that, and he said, I forgot. But that makes no sense because I gave the command like 2 seconds before he put the paper in his book bag. I want to be forgiving for stuff like this because I'm also neurodiverse and tend to forget things, but this doesn't seem like forgetfulness. It just seems like blatantly ignoring me because he doesn't care about what I say. It's not just this, but other things too. I'm not sure whether to punish the backtalk and ignoring my demands, but I also don't have the patience to be understanding of him in this area. So this is a very common example. So kid seems defiant. Kid ignores what you say. Kid seems to forget even though you tell him 2 seconds right before. You tell him, give him kid doesn't like it. So if y'all want to bypass this, and I have dealt with this myself, we have to start by understanding the brain of someone with ADHD. We have to start by understanding how their brain shapes their experience, because what you see as a parent is very different from what your child experiences. And once we understand how their brain works, we can craft a strategy that fits the child and will result in the behavior that you want. Okay, I know it sounds unbelievable, but let's understand this. So let's start by understanding the kid. This is the kid's experience. So the kid does homework. And at the very end of homework, parent says, put this in your bag. Put this in folder, and then folder in bag. This seems very simple, right? You're just a parent. You're just telling him, hey, like, just do this thing, bruh. It's easy. I just told you to do it. Just do it. But the kid seems like the kid is defiant. So let's understand literally what's going on in the kid's brain. So the first is when a child with ADHD is doing homework, what this means is that after the homework, the child is exhausted. They are cognitively exhausted. So let's understand this. So the child has frontal lobes. Frontal lobes allow them to restrain impulses, pay attention, focus. Okay, this is what the frontal lobes do. So normally, if you're a neurotypical person and you finish your homework, you have enough frontal lobe gas in the tank that you can put things away properly. Because at the very end, we'll get to this in a second. But with kids with ADHD, you don't have any gas in the tank, which means that they are exhausted, which means that they can't pay attention. It's very difficult for them to restrain their impulses and do what you ask. They can't focus. They're already empty. Empty frontal lobes at the end of homework. Okay, this is the first problem. Second problem is I want y'all to think about the emotional experience of a child who is struggling to do homework. So this is a kid that has been doing homework. Okay, I have to do homework. I have to force my mind to pay attention. I'm paying attention. I'm paying attention. I'm paying attention. I'm finally done. Holy shit, this is so hard, but I'm finished. Now I'm free. I did it. This is so hard for me, but I did a good job. I did what mommy and daddy told me to do. I have my homework finished. I worked really hard. I succeeded. I'm done. This is a win. I'm free. Now, in comes parent and says, no, you're not free. You have to do more. You have to do something else. You have to do one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. So think about the emotional experience when you're done for the week and you've worked really hard. You've worked really hard for the whole week. And it's Friday at 6 p.m. and you're like, I'm done for the day. I'm done. I'm going to head home. And your boss walks in and says, oh, by the way, can you do one more thing? It'll just take a minute. Think about your emotional experience in that moment. And you are a full-grown adult. This is what the child with ADHD experiences. The other thing to keep in mind is that the child with ADHD has a dysregulated limbic system. So remember that ADHD doesn't just affect the frontal lobes, it also affects our emotional circuitry. Which means that the child with ADHD, when we can handle something, a kid with ADHD won't be able to handle it emotionally. So they experience more intense emotion. It is more difficult to control their emotion. So for you, it's just putting one piece of paper in the folder and putting the folder in the book bag when you're cognitively exhausted. But for them, it's like, okay, now take these 100 papers and put them into 100 different folders and organize them and then put them all in your book bag in order. So the emotional experience is literally more intense. We have fMRI studies that show that kids with ADHD suffer from emotional dysregulation because the literal signal in their brain is more intense than the signal that we experience. Furthermore, since their frontal lobes are empty, their ability to control this emotional outburst or this emotional response is weakened. Okay? So let's look at this case again. All right. Trying to alter his environment. He fights me on every little thing. Okay? He's been arguing whenever I ask him to do something simple. So when the homework is done, the kid is already exhausted, and then the parent says, oh, and there's one more thing to do. Okay? It's not that, and then let's go to the third thing, okay? So let's talk about this. Hold on. Okay. I asked him why he did that, and he said, I forgot. But that makes no sense because I gave the command like 2 seconds before he put it in his book bag. Now, hold on a second. So this is really important. When your child with ADHD gives you an answer that makes no sense, don't just assume that they are wrong. Don't do that. If it doesn't make sense to you, y'all need to come to an accord because there is something that you may not understand. And this is what really frustrates parents because parents will say, I just told them 2 seconds ago, but they forget. How can they forget? So let's understand a third neuroscientific mechanism. Attentional problems. So remember that in ADHD, people don't forget. This is a very common misconception. People assume forgetfulness in ADHD is not a memory deficit. So we see memory deficits in things like dementia or delirium. These are actually, dementia is like a memory deficit. This is not, people with ADHD have memories that are totally fine. They can remember stuff fine. The problem with ADHD is that stuff does not sink in. This is the problem. They are not paying attention when you are speaking, so they never hear you in the first place. So the more cognitively exhausted you are at the end of your homework, the harder it is to pay attention to one more thing. Right? So I want y'all to imagine this. Imagine that you're at the end of an international flight and you've been on the plane for 24 hours. And then some dude in the airport gives you a list of like 16 things to do. And you just can't pay attention. You can listen to the first like 2 or 3 minutes, but at the end of it, you just can't pay attention to the rest of it. It's not sinking in. It's not that they don't forget. They don't forget. It never goes in the first place. So if your child says, I forgot, and you're like, that makes no sense, it's an attentional problem, okay? So now these are the 3 problems that we have. We have frontal lobes that are exhausted. We have a limbic system that is hyperactive. I was free, but now you're taking that away. There's one more thing. Oh my God, one more thing. That's harder to regulate. And since their frontal lobes are exhausted, they have difficulty listening to what you're saying. Now, the good news is that we can fix all of this. Once we understand how their brain works, we can institute systems to actually correct all of these, okay? So this is where there's one big mistake that parents make, which is to think about when is the timing of the request. So remember that, let's say, here's your frontal lobe energy. So this is your child's ability to pay attention, follow through, even regulate emotions. Okay? Now here's homework over time. So as your child with ADHD does their homework, this is what happens to their attentional energy. And then you tell them down here, one more thing. Doesn't work. So here's the key thing. This is when you need to tell them. If you're trying to create structure in your child's life, you cannot create structure and implement structure at the same time. You need to plan the structure. That's the whole point of structure, right? It's built ahead of time. So if we think about structure in something like a house, we don't build the roof when it starts raining, right? That's absurd. You build the roof way ahead of time, and then when it rains, the roof is already ready. It's ready. It's there. Everything is set up. This is not what parents with ADHD do with their kids. They create the structure when things are burning down or when things are going wrong. Does that make sense? Oh, the kid did not put their thing in the proper folder. Therefore, let me teach the kid where to put it. No. That's not creating structure. That is dealing with a fire that has already gotten out of hand. Structure is created ahead of time, preemptively, not at the moment when you need it. Okay? So here's what I would recommend that we do. And there are a couple of other techniques that we can use here, okay? So what I would do is literally practice and explain organization. So what we're going to do before we even start the homework, is we're going to take the kid and we're going to say, hey, so let's talk a little bit about where our homework goes before we do our homework. Where does homework go? And there's a huge thing that parents miss out on, is that they try to explain things to their kid. But if you've got a kid with ADHD, you need to leverage their understanding. Ask questions. Okay? So what we want to do is ask questions. You can ask them, okay, where should we put our homework when it's done? Why do we put it in there? Can we leave it out on the table and then put it in later? What happens if you leave it somewhere and then you're going to organize it later? What do you think will happen? And the kid is smart. The kid knows, oh, maybe I'll forget where it is. Okay, so then what should you do about that? Leverage their understanding. And this is a big thing that a lot of neurotypical parents don't understand, is you can't take for granted the stuff that is easy for you to learn. See, neurotypical people will connect the dots. And the whole challenge with raising a neurodiverse kid is that they don't connect the dots the same way that you do. So you have to spend time explaining things that otherwise don't need to be explained. And if you take that step, all of the effort of the mess that you deal with down the road, like this all gets fixed. You just have to do it up front and in the right way. So what I would recommend is that you first have a conversation with your child, right? So you have to show up Tuesday at 5 p.m. when nothing else is going on. There's no homework being done. They have a full frontal lobe. They've just gotten back from their soccer class. We're going to sit down. You've had a good day. Let's talk about homework. And then what we're going to do, so we're going to start with questions, right? Go with understanding, questions, okay? And then we're going to explain organization. So maybe I should do these in the opposite order. Okay, so first thing you're going to do, number one, is ask questions. And shoot for understanding. What does your child understand? Okay? Second thing that we're going to do is explain if you need to, because sometimes you'll need to explain. They won't understand. So you'll say, okay, this is why we do things, so that we can find them. Do you sometimes forget your homework? Do you have difficulty misplacing your homework? Okay, so here's the reason that we put it in the folder. And then all you have to remember is to check your folder. You don't have to remember where the homework is. What's easier? Checking your folder or trying to remember where your homework is? Okay, good. And this is the third step that a lot of parents miss. 95% of parents miss. Practice. You have to literally practice this skill. So what I would say is that, okay, now what we're going to do is I've got 3 different pieces of paper that are in 3 different places in the house. What I want you to do is go get each of those 3 pieces of paper and then put them in your folder and put your folder in your backpack. Now, this is really important. So you don't just do this once, you do this every day for 1 to 2 weeks. This is our task that we are going to learn. 3 pieces of paper in 3 folders. It takes less than 60 seconds once they get good at it. And here's the beautiful thing. In the ADHD brain, we know that these parts of the brain, right, our emotional system, our frontal lobes, we have attentional problems, but there is one circuit of the brain, not one, there are many circuits of the brain that are completely intact that function totally fine for kids with ADHD. And as we use the intact circuits of the brain, their life will become extraordinarily easy. So the first circuit that we're going to talk about, or the main one, is the habit circuitry. This is completely fine. So the habit circuitry is the endocannabinoid system. So this system is not altered in ADHD. The problem with kids with ADHD is if you are constantly nagging them and if there's no consistency, their habits can never form. This is the real tragedy of being a human being with ADHD, is that the very circuit that can fix all of your problems, which is the habit formation circuitry, never gets enough consistency to form a habit in the first place. So there's one thing that can save you, and it's very hard to activate that thing. So as a parent, what we need to do is build these habits. So for 2 weeks, all we're going to do is practice putting our thing away, putting our paper away when we're done with our homework. And now what happens is if you institute this properly, what you'll find is that for 2 weeks, you're focusing on this. And then after that, the kid will know how to do it. And once they know how to do it, you will not have to nag them. You will not have to remind them. It'll become habit, even if they're not paying attention. This is the key thing, right? So if we look at this, Remember that the whole point is you're asking the kid to pay attention, restrain their impulses, and do this extra step. If the child doesn't pay attention, they will end up habitually doing it anyway because it's a different part of their brain. So even if they're emotionally exhausted, if their frontal lobes are exhausted, the habits kick in. That's exactly what we want. When the child stops paying attention, they'll behave in the right way. It's beautiful. Okay? Questions? Endocannabinoid system. Right? So yeah. So that someone's saying like, what do your kids understand? Exactly. So the problem is also that, see, when oftentimes if you're neurotypical, you can connect the dots. So it's obvious to you that if you put the homework in the folder, then you won't lose the homework. But sometimes if your kid has ADHD, you have to connect those dots for them, right? So you have to ask them, like, when you're looking for your homework, where should it be in the folder? And even if they can come up with the right answer, it's not that they won't be able to come up with the right answer. You have to ask them a set of questions, and then those connections will form in their brain. They can come up with the right answer, but you have to ask them the question, and once they come up with the right answer, that's great. They may answer right away, but you're still like connecting those dots for them. Yeah, so we'll talk about nagging in a second. What if the parent is ADHD and can't build any habit? Very good question. So this is a huge problem, right? Is that neurodiverse kids oftentimes have neurodiverse parents. And so the beautiful thing is that it's going to be difficult, but once you figure out how to do this for yourself, you will be the best person on the planet to teach it to your child, because you have the experience of struggling yourself. So if we look at our basic principles, remember that a habit formation is difficult at the end of the day. So what we need to do, if you're a parent who has difficulty with structure, is first you have to implement the structure yourself. And second is you should practice too. Right? So practice putting your keys in the right place, your wallet in the right place. Literally what we'll do is like, with my kid, I will practice this 3 times in a row. Go put your backpack here. Go put your water bottle in the sink. Go put your snack in the snack container in the sink. And now we're going to pull them out of the sink. You're going to pack your bag again. We're going to walk out the door, and we're going to come in, and we're going to do it 2 more times. We will practice this. And once they do it 3 times a day, every day for 1 week, then they know how to do it. I never have to tell them again. So you should do the same thing as an adult. It feels humiliating. It feels stupid. Implement that structure early on in the day when your frontal lobes still have some energy, and literally go through the motions. Okay? What if the kid refuses? Okay, so we'll get to defiant kids in a second. But this is where, like, when your child refuses something, what do you do? Right? As a parent, there's all manner of bribery, cajoling, instituting limits, setting boundaries, punishment. You take your pick. And this is where what I sort of find is that kids don't refuse everything, right? So you have to pick a couple of things, and then you have to figure out, okay, what's the right way to approach this? So sometimes that's like, if they refuse to do this particular thing, you can let that slide. Okay, we're not going to worry about homework, but we're going to put your shoes away. We're going to put your food away. So you can focus on one thing at a time. And if you run into resistance in one place, you just focus on something else. And then you realize as a parent, for 2 weeks, we're going to have trouble with homework. And then you come back to the kid and you say, okay, well, you didn't want to do it then. That's fine. I gave you 2 weeks. Now we have to learn it because this is causing problems. Okay? All right. Oh, wow. So I was diagnosed with ADHD 5 years ago and recently discovered I've been living with black mold. It has rendered my ADHD meds ineffective. Any tips for what I can do besides move out of my house? That's absolutely a question that I would ask your doctor, because I'm not sure about the influence of black mold and ADHD medication. I'm also curious how you concluded that the black mold is rendering your stuff ineffective. Generally speaking, when you have an environmental allergy, the right medical thing is to, get rid of the allergy or move or something like that. Not everyone is able to do that. But I'm really fascinated by the concept, and I'm going to do some research, and maybe we'll do a video about environmental allergies and ADHD. Thank you very much for the question. Okay. So, hi, I'm 17-year-old and I just can't bring myself to any good habits. So this is something important to understand. If you have trouble building good habits, there are a couple of ways to make it easier. The first problem that we have with building good habits is that we're too ambitious. So we have so many habits that we need to build, and we need to build them so robustly. So what you can also do is level up your habit formation circuitry by starting small. Okay? So don't build the habit that you absolutely need. Build the habit that you can build. So it can be something as simple as I'm going to put all my clothes in the laundry basket first thing in the morning. I'm going to make my bed first thing in the morning. Start super small. Second thing that we want to do is do it early in the day. So as we become mentally exhausted, it becomes very difficult to control our impulses. So the earlier in the day that you do it, the better off you will be. The third thing to consider is remember that the amount of dopamine in our brain is like a lemon. So if you sort of think about it, at the beginning of the day, the lemon is full of juice. So even a slight squeeze, something that is not that enjoyable, will still give you a decent amount of juice. But if you play something like a video game first thing in the morning, it squeezes all the juice out of the lemon. This is like a very tight squeeze. And then you have no dopamine left for reinforcing other behaviors. So it is very difficult to build a habit after you play a video game. But if you try to build a habit first, it is going to be way easier and you will get more reinforcement. And then what will end up happening is that then you can play a video game and that's totally fine. So start first thing in the morning, start small. And the other thing is that a part of your mind will say, oh my God, this isn't enough. Don't worry about that. You will level up your habit formation circuitry, and then it'll be easier to build more difficult habits. Okay? If y'all are curious about that dopamine stuff, we have a good video about that got uploaded maybe about a week ago on how to control your dopamine circuitry. Okay? All right, let's move on. Great questions. Okay, so okay, let's talk about, someone asked about nagging. Okay, so how to get things done without resorting to anger. I find getting my kid to do things extraordinarily difficult without resorting to some level of disapproval. They don't take me seriously if I'm not nagging, snapping, or lecturing. Basic tasks like flushing the toilet, making their bed, getting ready for school, not waking up their sister at 5 a.m., putting away toys, etc. require a huge amount of effort to get done. A gentle prompt rarely gets results, and lists, signs, and routines are ignored. They're very anxious, and I see flashes of fear in their eyes at the smallest level of disapproval from me. I remember being scared of my mother growing up, and I don't want my kid to have the same relationship with me as their dad. So this is super scary. But once again, if we understand the brain of a child with ADHD, we can figure out a different way to approach the child. So let's start by looking at the effect of some of these things. Okay? So if you have a child who doesn't listen, chances are you end up resorting to nagging, snapping, or lecturing. And even though it feels like these things work, these things are not doing what you want them to do. So let's start by understanding why nagging never works. So why do we nag? Because they're not paying attention. And what we discover is since they're not paying attention, I will keep reminding them. You tell them once, you tell them twice, you tell them 3 times. You're saying the same thing over and over and over again. So as someone nags you, what do you start doing? So just think about this, right? So when you get nagged in life, you're not paying attention to begin with, so we start nagging, but the more that someone nags you, the more you ignore the other person. So the more you nag your child, the more they will learn to ignore you. The second thing that you're doing is you are actually reinforcing the exact wrong things. So we have to nag our child with ADHD because they don't pay attention. But I want y'all to think for a second. When I nag my child to get something done, what I am actually doing is enabling their irresponsibility. Okay, so I once had a patient. And patient had a parent who was constantly nagging them. So kid is in college. Parent asks kid, hey, are you sure you're on time to register for your classes? Your class registration opens tomorrow. Do you have everything under control? And the kid is like, yeah, I'm an adult now. I'm a grown up. I know how to do it. Everything will be fine. The parent is like skeptical. So they ask the kid, hey, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Do you want me to call you? You want me to do this? Kid is like, no, I got it. Everything's under control. On the morning of registering classes, kid sleeps through his alarm. Wakes up late, doesn't register for classes on time. Guess who he blames? Blames mom. Mom, I know I told you not to wake me up, but you always wake me up anyway. Now I didn't get to register for my classes and it's your fault. So when we nag our children, we are forcing them to pay attention, which means that their frontal lobes don't have to do the lifting. We are serving as an external frontal lobe for our child. We are taking the responsibility they don't need to remember because, by the way, I'm going to nag you constantly. I'll make sure you don't forget. So when we nag, we make sure it gets done. This is what a parent does, right? We're making sure we're taking the responsibility. You remove the responsibility from your child and you are creating dependence. The exact opposite thing. So as a parent, you'll have noticed this. If you start to nag, they never learn. You'll continue to nag. The more you nag, the more you need to nag. If, God bless y'all, some of y'all are in romantic relationships with a husband or wife who nags you, or you have to nag your husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, you will find that if you nag them once, you never stop. I have to nag them. That's the only way things get done. Both of y'all don't like it. That's because you're taking the responsibility and then you are creating dependence. Stop nagging. Second thing, let's talk about snapping. So remember that kids with ADHD, this is super scary, but let's understand this. Kids with ADHD, I see flashes of fear in their eyes at the smallest level of disapproval. Let's understand the neuroscientific mechanism of this. Kids with ADHD have attentional problems. Okay, so let's understand this, okay? I'm going to make a diagram. So here's the kid with the ADHD. Here's their thoughts. A, 1, B, C, they're thinking about all these things. Now, here's the outside world. So the outside world, like a voice, tries to enter into their consciousness. Voice doesn't work, right? Gets knocked away because their attention, they're so hyper-focused on their thoughts that a regular voice does not penetrate into consciousness. If you are neurotypical and someone talks to you, you will hear them. You will stop your thinking and you will be able to pay attention. In ADHD, it does not penetrate. So what do parents naturally learn? Loud voice. In order to penetrate the barrier of attention, I have to yell. That's the only way that they are able to listen. You're not wrong as a parent. Now, here's the problem. This is what it takes to break through the barrier. But the physiologic response when your parent yells at you is still triggered. Right? So the physiologic response of being yelled at is the same, but the attentional barrier is different in ADHD. What this means is that every time they realize their parent is talking to them, they get a cortisol, adrenaline, and fear response. This is the tragedy of ADHD, is that someone needs to yell to get your attention, but the parts of your brain that detect danger still get triggered from yelling. So what this means is that every time your parent is talking to you, you're getting yelled at. The psychological impact is the same, even though the intentional impact is necessary. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is why the kid is fearful, because the only way to get things done is to yell at them to break through their attention. And then let's talk about lecturing. Now, the problem with lecturing is that there's no understanding. And the kid has difficulty paying attention. So lecturing is a waste of time. If you could give a 30-minute lecture to a kid with ADHD, they're going to catch the first minute of it. Doesn't matter how long it is. Doesn't matter how well you explain things. This is going to lead to frustration on everyone's part. The kid knows they should be paying attention, but they're not able to. You feel frustrated because you've explained it 15 times and they don't get it. That's because the lecture, they can't pay attention to the lecture. This is why we want to use understanding and questioning. You must engage with your child when you teach them if they have ADHD. Ask them questions. Okay, so in this case, what is the parent trying to do? Flushing the toilet. Okay, so like here's literally how I would teach my kid to flush the toilet. So what I would do is I'd say, hey, when we go potty, do we flush toilets or not? And they say like, yeah, we do, or no, we don't. And then you can ask them, why do we flush toilets? They'll say, to get rid of the poop. Okay, we're going to do an experiment. Every time we use your toilet for 3 days, we're not going to flush. No flushing your toilet. You're not allowed to flush your toilet. I'm going to use your toilet. We're not going to flush. Every time we use my toilet, we're going to flush. If you do this with your kid for 3 days and you don't let them to flush, they will learn why you flush toilets. They will have a blast doing it. Let's see what it smells like after 1 day. Do you want to flush? Nope. We're going to wait for a second day. We're going to wait for a third day. This is literally how I would teach my kid to flush the toilet. We'd have one toilet in the house that never gets flushed, one toilet in the house that always gets flushed. And then you pick which toilet do you want in your bathroom. You must teach them, help them understand, but not by lecturing. Use experiments, use engagement. Kids with ADHD are oftentimes brilliant. You just have to engage their mind in the right way. Don't install an auto-flushing toilet. Completely defeats the purpose. That's awful. You're damn right it is. So this is the other thing to understand about ADHD kids. Kids with ADHD are incredibly sensory. If you can use their sense organs, they will understand way better. Okay? Not rub their nose in it. Okay, so maybe not your toilet and my toilet. That's cruel. So this is what we're going to do. If you guys think that's cool, this is what I would say. I would say you can use daddy's toilet whenever you want to, and daddy doesn't get to flush for 3 days. Let's see what happens. Or I'll even give them a choice. One of these toilets is going to be flushed. One of them is not going to be flushed. Which one do you want to pick? Daddy's toilet doesn't get flushed? Okay, fine. Let's see what happens. You get to use daddy's toilet whenever you want to, and I don't get to flush. Let's check on it day 1. Let's check on it day 2. Let's check on it day 3. Can daddy please flush? Will you remember to flush? It'll work. Right? So if you don't turn it into a punishment, so you can take one for the team. Oftentimes when I'm teaching my kid with ADHD something, I'm the one that gets punished. Okay? So this is exactly what I mean. So you work on one thing at a time, you understand how to engage them properly, and then you go at it from there. Okay? Now, with something like nagging, this is also where what we want to do is we want to take one of these tasks, take your pick, and we're going to work on this simple task for 1 to 2 weeks. So the problem with this is as a parent, you get frustrated with bedtime routine, right? So if you want to do bedtime routine, that's fine. We can do bedtime routine or whatever. You pick one thing because your kid can't form 15 habits all at the same time. So getting ready for school. So let's say bedtime routine. Not getting ready for school, okay? So what I would do is have them literally practice their bedtime routine. So we're going to brush our teeth, change clothes, pack our bag, grab water. in case you need it overnight. And then what we're going to do, we're not going to do it once every night. That's not practice. See, when you're learning to play the piano, you just don't play one song. You don't just try playing it once and then you're done for the day. I'll give it one more shot tomorrow. No, you're going to do this 3 times in one night for 1 week, right? Every night for 1 week. We're going to brush our teeth 3 times. We're going to change our clothes 3 times. We're going to change out of our pajamas back into our regular clothes, and we're going to change back into our pajamas. We're going to do the whole routine 3 times. It's going to take us 1 hour if necessary, however long it takes. We're going to practice the routine until it becomes a habit. See, a lot of parents, the mistake they make is they do not explicitly practice these things. They just do it every single day, and it's a fight every single day. I can almost guarantee you that if you do this 3 times a day for 2 weeks and your kid spends 1 hour and you are spending 1 hour with them, they will get faster at it, they will get better at it, and they will learn how to do it habitually. Does that make sense? So use understanding, use experimentation, make it fun. And really, I mean, there's a reason why I didn't pick the bed, right? So I picked the flushing toilet on purpose because what I found is that kids with ADHD are very sensory. So if something smells, they will learn. Okay, this is why I don't flush the toilet. If you do this and you make things fun, oh my God, can daddy please flush the toilet? It's been 2 days. The flash of fear in their eyes and the sense of disapproval will disappear. They will do what you want them to do. They'll enjoy doing it. You'll enjoy doing it. It'll completely change the dynamic. But no nagging, no snapping, no lecturing. Okay? Questions? Good. So someone's saying, whoa, this actually makes so much sense for myself. Perfect. Toilet and make it fun? Absolutely. So kids with ADHD, you got to understand, oftentimes kids with ADHD have a different sense of humor. They're very sensory, right? And if you don't want to punish your kid, right, so then you take the team. You take one for the team. You'll be amazed at how quickly they learn. So my kid didn't like lemon. Just to give you all an example. So she didn't like lemon. And when she gets sick, she needs to have something like honey lemon tea. But she did not like lemon in the tea. She didn't like the way it tasted. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Next time you get sick, I'm going to have you cough a glob of mucus into one bowl. And the next time you cough, we're going to have 2 bowls of mucus. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take a lemon and we're going to do an experiment. We're going to squeeze the lemon juice into one bowl, and we're going to see what the scientific effect of acid on mucus is. Once we did that experiment and it sunk in, now she has lemon. She understands what it does. It's beautiful. Engage with their senses. What do y'all think lemon does to mucus? I'm serious. Like, this kind of stuff works very well, right? These are natural bodily functions. Like, there's nothing to be ashamed of with this stuff. So you would think it makes it thinner, but it actually makes it thicker. It causes it to congeal. Okay? It doesn't dissolve or digest it. You'd be amazed. So that's why, like, I don't know what goes on. So there's also some evidence that when you drink lemon, it changes your pH, and then you actually get a compensatory metabolic alkalosis from lemon. So it actually causes it to congeal. So if you sort of think about, if you have something like, milk, boiled milk, and you add lemon to it, what happens? It separates the whey from it creates a heterogeneity, right? So like, this is how you make paneer. So you heat up warm milk and then you add some lemon to it, and then some of the solids come out of solution, and then you're left with water. That's what it actually does. How did you come up with this experiment? Like, I don't know. So theoretically, people say that lemon is supposed to help with colds, right? So let's just study it. Let's see what goes on. Just engage their senses in some way. How can you get them to not only doing their chores, but also seeing that they have to be done? Okay, so there are a couple of things to do. So with chores, so I wouldn't say chores, first of all. Don't do chores, do one thing at a time. And then what's the purpose of doing something like a chore, right? So this is where you have to show them. Okay, so if you don't do the chore, what happens? If you do the chore, what happens? So I'd start with like certain things like, like, I don't know, like putting your books away. So what's the advantage of cleaning your room? When you clean your room, you get to actually find your things. So showing them, okay, do you want to play with this? Like, and if they're using something like technology, what I would do is like, I'd do something very simple. So when I use the controller, I'm not going to put it away properly. Oh, you want to play a video game? Where's the controller? I don't know. Daddy didn't put it away properly. You can go looking for it, but we're not going to touch a device until you find the controller because you need to find the controller. Oh, wow. Okay, you did find it. Good job. The next day, when Daddy plays with it, he's going to put it in another random place. We're not going to put things away properly. Right? So teach them the lesson. Oh, you want me to put things away properly? This is the value of putting things away properly. Now it's your turn. Right? And then have them go through the habit formation of it. It's really important. Very important. And then at some point, there may be certain chores which they don't understand or agree with, which is fine. They still have to do them. We are not doing XYZ until this is done. Okay, so you also can set limits. Right? So you can illustrate. Your job is to teach. The other thing that we oftentimes do as parents is that we do not reward the right behavior in the right way. So oftentimes when our kid completes the chore, we try to bribe them with something. So we'll say, oh, you get ice cream, or you get this, or you get this. The right completion of a chore is raising awareness of the benefit of the chore. So what I will do, for example, for making the bed is like, hey, like, should we get it? Does this bed look inviting to get into? Let's get into bed. This is going to be lots of fun. So when it comes to like making the bed with kids, what I'll oftentimes do is so with my kid, this is how I taught my kid to make their bed somewhat. I haven't really taught them, but this is how I've worked on it some. It's not something I prioritized. But what I'll do is I'll make the bed with them in it. So you guys get to lay down, Daddy's going to make the bed, and let's see how that feels. Okay, so then what I'll do is they'll be laying in bed, I'll set up the pillows, and then I'll put the covers over them, right? And I'll you lift that up, you fluff the covers. They love it. It's awesome to be in the bed while it's being made on top of you. Okay, now you do it. Now Daddy's turn to lay inside, and you guys make the bed on top of me. Oh my God, that's so much fun. That feels amazing. What do y'all think? Is it funner to get into a bed that is made, or do you like to get into a messy bed? Okay, so illustrate whatever you can. Right. So like someone's saying, so they used to get Skittles for doing the right thing. No, because that just teaches them to want Skittles. See, if there's a chore that gets done, there must be a benefit to it. And then like that's the benefit that you want them to feel the reward of the task itself, not externally motivate them with something else. This is another problem that I see a lot. Is a lot of parents motivate their kids with video games. If you do this, you get the game. If you do this, you get the game. If you do this, you get the game. In psychiatry, we have this concept of something called overvalued ideas. So these are things that people will place a lot of emphasis on. If the prize for all good behaviors is video games, you will actually reinforce the video game addiction. Right? This is literally what happens with addicts. When I have addicts who are addicted to heroin or fentanyl, anything for the next fix. I'll rob for the next fix. I'll do unsavory things for the next fix. I will work my job for the next fix. I will borrow money for the next fix. I will mow your lawn for the next fix. Everything is about the fix. It's about the fix. It's about the fix. When you have a drug addict who is willing to do anything to get enough money to buy their next fix, you're not teaching them sobriety. You can create a situation where everything that your child does properly, you get games, you get games, you get games. You're reinforcing their addiction. Does that make sense? We don't want to do that. Help them understand the reward of the task itself. And if you cannot help them understand the reward of the task itself. Maybe you need to consider whether this task really needs to be done or not. Right? You should question it, and you will earn their respect if you question the rules that you put on them. You should hold yourself to the same standard. The standard is you should do this because it's good. But if it's not good, you have to be fair. Maybe you don't need to do it. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Why did my child say I was dead? Hi, I'm looking for advice. My 9-year-old ADHD son told his teacher today for no reason my mom died. The teacher called to check on us and found out that he lied. She didn't know what to say and I didn't know how to defend him. He lies impulsively a lot about many things. Usually it is to avoid doing things like saying he washed his hands when he didn't. His dad and I try our best to support him with his ADHD. We are literally doing everything in the book to help. When it comes to lying, we actually make consequences smaller when he tells the truth to try and encourage the behavior. However, I'm not sure how to deal with it this time. The lie is huge, and I know this might sound silly, but my feelings are really hurt. When I was a child, losing a parent was unimaginable to me, and now he is casually lying about me dying. I know that he loves me, but I still can't understand how and why he would say something like this. I'm not even sure what is the proper response in this case. So this is another example of we need to understand the brain of ADHD in order to understand what is going on and how to deal with it. So the first thing is the child lies, okay, about something big. And then the parent is hurt. How can my child be so heartless? I've lost a parent. This child has no idea what they're saying. So let's look at how the brain of ADHD is different. Number one, impulsivity. So in most human beings, there is a barrier between thought and language. See, thinking and speaking are two different functions. I can think one thing and I can say a different thing. This is the experience of most human beings. In ADHD, oftentimes there is no barrier between thought and speaking. So you will know this, that sometimes people with ADHD can rattle on. They can just talk and talk and talk. No one can be paying attention. They're not even paying attention to whether you're paying attention. They just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Right? So now I want you to think about this. Do you have thoughts that are untrue? Absolutely, all the time. Are those thoughts lies? Not really. So a lie is when you intentionally speak a mistruth. But your mind thinks all kinds of random things. You think, oh, like, what if I was a gorilla instead of a human? Right? That's not a lie. It's just your mind just randomly generates all sorts of thoughts. Right? What would happen if my parents died? What would it be like if they died? So your child is 9 years old, 10 years old, is starting to understand the concept of death. So when you're understanding the concept of something, your mind plays around with it. Now, the problem is that with impulsivity, right? So there's impaired frontal lobe function. Which means that the moment the thought comes in, it comes out of the mouth. So this is not a lie. It is just a thought that is spoken out loud. Okay? It's not a statement of truth. So you need to understand this about your kid. Number one. They're not lying. They had a thought and they spoke it out loud. Number two. Kids with ADHD struggle with empathy. Now let's understand why this is. So if we think about what is empathy. So I'm over here. I have my experience. And there's another human over here, and they have their experience. And right now, my attention is focused on this. As I become empathic, my attention wanders and considers this. So literally, you have to pay attention to someone else in order to be empathic. So remember, with kids with ADHD, they struggle with their attentional control. But attentional control isn't just about studying, right? Your attention does all kinds of things. Paying attention while you're chopping vegetables, you cut yourself. Why do you cut yourself? Because you weren't paying attention. So empathy requires directing your mind to the experience of other people. Kids with ADHD have difficulty with this. It's not that they don't understand other people. We'll get to why they may not, but that's not the problem. The problem is that they literally, once they're focused on their own perspective, they have difficulty stepping out of whatever they're focused on. They can be focused on Legos. They can be focused on their own perspective. They can be focused on the television. And then it becomes hard to defocus this attention and move it anywhere else. So as an example, let's say I'm playing on the playground and I just go down the slide and there's a line of 3 kids waiting to go down the slide. So as I go down the slide, kid number 1 starts to climb to the top. I am so excited. Oh my God, that was so much fun. All my mind can think about is I want to do it again. So I run from the bottom of the slide back around to the line and I cut in line. It's not that I don't care about other kids. It's that it never crossed my mind to consider the impact of my thoughts on other human beings. I did not think about it. This is the problem, right? So when you have a kid like this, they do not think about the impact, right? They don't even think about like how would other people, they didn't even realize. The impulse came in, the thought came in, they spoke. They don't have the attentional control to consider other people. This is something that needs to be trained in kids with ADHD. Now, the third thing to consider is that once the parent is hurt, now things become even more difficult, okay? Once the parent is hurt. And why? Because now you're adding your own emotions to the equation. And this is hard for your child to understand. Right? So once you feel betrayed and hurt by your kid, all they detect is the negativity. When the negativity kicks in, their ability to understand things and learn things shuts off. So their learning circuitry literally shuts off and they go into survival mode. So now it's hard to have a conversation with them. So as a parent, if your kid is, if you're upset about something, the first thing you need to do is calm yourself emotionally. Recognize that your kid didn't mean any of this stuff. And then you can explain things to them. So once you disarm the emotion and everything calms down, you don't teach them the lesson then and there, by the way. So this is another really important tip for kids with ADHD. Don't teach them lessons when they make mistakes. Because when they make mistakes, their emotions are activated. They're feeling afraid, panicked. They're in survival mode. And they can't understand something in a nuanced way, right? So like if I'm walking down the street and I get bit by an alligator, I'm going to learn a lesson, which is get the fuck away from the alligator, never go near alligators, and by the way, don't walk down the street. But you will learn all the wrong lessons because your brain is so adrenaline focused, it's so influenced by adrenaline that it doesn't learn things in a nuanced way. And when it comes to something like empathy, kids with ADHD cannot learn empathy when they are in a panicked mode of mind. Because what happens when I'm feeling fearful, it's literally very hard. It becomes way harder to think about someone else. When I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling betrayed, all I can think about is myself. So especially with empathy, don't teach them the lesson when they make a mistake. Wait a couple of days. Hey, let's try to understand why you said what you said. Did you have control over it even? And this is where you have to teach really basic stuff to kids with ADHD, stuff that we all take for granted. What effect do your words have on other people? Really start that simply. What is the effect of your words on other people? What is the relationship between humans and words? This is the level at which you need to start. Let's do an experiment. I'm going to say some words. Let's see what that impact that has on you. Instead of going to the pool tomorrow, we're going to do extra chores. I spoke words. What impact does it have on you? Ooh, that hurts. Instead of doing chores today, we're going to stay up and watch a movie. Oh my God, what impact does that have? Okay, now, but those are things that have to do with chores and activities that you like. How about this? I really love you the most. You're such a wonderful kid. What impact does that have? Versus, I'm really disappointed in you. It really hurt my feelings that you did not do X, Y, or Z. What impact does that have? Now you try. Why don't you try to use your words and see if you can make me feel a certain way? Right? So then the kid will understand. They'll be like, you look like a butt. And then I will be hurt, right? And then we'll all laugh. And then, Daddy, I love you. And then we'll hug, and that feels good. Okay. So it looks like words have an impact. But are you done then? No. For 2 weeks, you are going to pay attention to words and the impact that they have. So when you tell your kid it's time for bed, you stop right there and you ask them, hey, when I said this to you, what impact did it have? When you got home and I said, hey, it's so great to see you, how did my words affect you? Okay? So this is where like you have to basically like show them over and over again over a period of 2 weeks, encourage them to play around with words and see what impact it has. This is how you will teach them. They have to understand. So that's the trickiest thing with ADHD. You can't teach a kid with ADHD. Their mind is not as receptive to the knowledge. But the beautiful thing is their capacity to understand is very high. Because their attention does not sit and listen to you for 15 minutes while you are teaching. You have to get their attention engaged. And usually getting their attention engaged involves experimentation, paying attention, emotional activation, hopefully in a positive way. Okay? All right. Okay. Let me get... Whoop. Yeah, you actually ask them the question in the moment, right? So for a period of 2 weeks, what we're going to do is pay attention. Hold on. I hear a phone ringing. But I don't... Oh. 1 second, chat. Okay, I don't know where it is. Whatever. Okay. Can you all hear that? No, so people are saying parents don't parent. So it's not that parents don't parent. It's that the parenting that we're taught doesn't work for kids with ADHD. Right? So the parenting that the default mode of parenting, which human beings have evolved over tens of thousands of years, doesn't work with kids with ADHD. It needs to be adapted. And what I literally do is I will pick 1 or 2 things to work on for a period of 2 weeks. And then in the moment, you can remind them of stuff, right? But not when they make a mistake. Let's pay attention to the impact of words. Let's do another experiment. Let's call your grandma. And let's see what impact our words have. Think about what you say ahead of time. What should we say to grandma before she picks up the phone? And now we're doing something very, very important. So if you think about it, so we normally think about what we say before we say it, right? But kids with ADHD are different. Some people think in order to speak. Kids with ADHD speak in order to think. Their thought process is out loud. Okay. Hold on a second. Okay. Hold on 1 second. All right, can y'all see this now? Sorry. I think this should be fine. Huh? Okay. Okay. Might they become manipulative? So your kids might become manipulative, but that's not the worst thing in the world. So understand this. See, being manipulative is a survival advantage when it comes to the world, right? So like, we don't want to be manipulative with bad intentions, but to understand human behavior is like a survival benefit. So this is one really common thing where a lot of parents will say, present a unified front. This is the way that you can get your kids to listen. Don't let them divide you. To which I say, hold on a second. So I think generally speaking, it's good as parents to present a unified front. But the goal of parenting is to prepare your child for the world that they're going to live in. And is the world filled with unified fronts that demand compliance? Is it an advantage if you work in a corporate environment to be able to understand what people want and advocate and get one powerful figure to be on your side when another powerful figure is not on your side? Having kids navigate any sort of crack between you and your potential spouse or other caregiver or whatever can be a very important skill to teach your kids. Right? Let them manipulate you a little bit. Let them understand how to get what they want. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. You as parents should be intentional about it. That's the main thing. So there's some cases where you want to present a unified front, and there are some cases where, just like anything else, you're going to let them take advantage of you. You're going to teach them. Right? It's not the worst thing in the world. And so what? So the kid gets to win because they've tricked mommy or daddy into giving them permission. Is that the worst thing in the world? Like, if we're talking about like drug use for teenagers, that's a different story. You want to present a unified front. There are absolutely times where you want to present a unified front. But I've also seen as a psychiatrist that one of the most traumatic things that a child can go through is their parents presenting a unified front when one of your parents is wrong. I've seen this in cases of physical abuse, emotional abuse, where one parent is abusive and then the other parent stands by and watches, right? And why is that? Because one parent is aggressive, one parent is controlling, and they control their spouse. You don't always want to present a unified front. One of the best things, the healthiest things that a child can experience is for one parent to go over the line and the other parent to contradict them publicly and directly. Hey, I think what you're doing is wrong. You want to teach your kid how to stand up for themselves? You have to model standing up to authority, which oftentimes means standing up to the other parent, creating conflict. It's terrifying. Unified front, unified front, unified front. No, we don't have, if I don't agree with you, we don't have to present a unified front. And I understand that the kid may manipulate us and may end up getting their way, but I think you are wrong. So we can absolutely talk about it. And this is also where I would advocate that you and your spouse, if you all disagree, instead of just presenting a unified front, you let your child watch healthy conflict. Hey, child, I know that you want to play video games. Your dad believes this. I believe this. We're going to talk it through, and we want you to listen and tell us what you think. By all means, have conflict. Have a healthy conflict with your child watching both sides. They will learn so much from that. Okay? Okay. Next up. Just close. Got time for maybe one more. Okay, let's do... Okay, let's see what we've got left. Okay. 10-year-old is always right and I am always wrong. I'm sick to death of being corrected 18,000 times a day about anything and everything. Me, I wish Amazon Music had a really, really like this one button. Netflix has always had a love button. Really? I don't think so. And I'd been corrected at least 18 times this morning. So straw, camelback, I chose to explore this. Yep, for 100% sure, 1,000,000,000% sure. So you're telling me, Mr. 10-year-old, that you know that since the day of its inception, Netflix had a love button? Yes, blah, blah, blah. Google's it. Netflix introduced the 2 thumbs up button in April of 2022, and he doesn't admit it. And then he rages, won't apologize, won't admit he's wrong, that I wasn't wrong, and it's just a stupid little thing, but I wasn't arguing about Netflix, but pointing out that no one likes to be corrected all the time, especially when they were right. How do I teach this without being my mother? Let me think about this. So, the first thing to understand is that if you pay attention to the parent is so stubborn about proving a point, right? So, if the parent is stubborn about proving a point, what does the child learn? That it is okay to be stubborn about proving a point, even when it's incredibly insignificant. Right is right and wrong is wrong. So it's kind of interesting because what the child will inherit is whatever you signal, which is stubbornness. So when you have stubborn parents, you have stubborn kids. And there's a second thing to understand. So when a child is 10 years old, we have to understand their brain development. So their capacity to engage in type 2 reasoning, which is critical thinking and being able to question your own results, is very poor for 10-year-olds. So in our brain, we have 2 kinds of reasoning circuits. We have type 1 reasoning, which is our impulsive answer. This is the answer that we think is logical, but is not actually logical. So I'll give you all a really good example of this. So someone goes to the grocery store and buys a bag of cookies. And then you ask them, after they purchase the cookies, why did you buy the cookies? They will give you some reason. They said, I bought the cookies because my roommate loves them. But the real reason they bought the cookies, they wouldn't have bought the cookies if they weren't on prominent display. So when they walked into the grocery store, they had no plans to buy cookies for their roommate, but they saw them. Their emotions got triggered, their impulses got triggered, their desires got triggered, and they bought the cookies. Then they will manufacture a false reason as to why they did it. This is type 1 reasoning. Type 2 reasoning is not rapid. It is actually critical thinking, it is logical, it is analytical. And we as doctors learn type 2 reasoning. It takes us 4 years to train to learn type 2 reasoning. We call it differential diagnosis. So I'll give you all a simple example of this. So we as doctors are trained not to jump to conclusions, but it is so easy to jump to conclusions. Patient walks into my office, looks like they have the flu, sounds like they have the flu. The last 3 people I saw have the flu. This means that they must have the flu. This is how the mind works. Jumps to a conclusion all the time. Jumps to conclusions all the time. So I want y'all to think about this. When you make some kind of decision, how long did you think about it? When you conclude that this guy is feeding in my game, the reason I'm losing is because my teammates suck, did you sit down and critically do a replay analysis of 50 of your games and try to figure out, okay, who made what kind of mistakes? Of course not. You just jump to a conclusion in the middle of it, and then you know it's because the reason you keep losing is because your teammates suck. This is type 1 reasoning. It is automatic. Kids, a 10-year-old has some degree of logic. Their logical circuitry is forming, so they can jump to conclusions very easily. But their type 2 reasoning is not intact. Their ability to critically look at their ideas has not developed very far as a 10-year-old. So this is why they always think they're right. The part of their brain that can second guess yourself is not very well formed. That's the way to think about type 2 reasoning. Now, the second thing is, what is the value of pointing out that someone is wrong? In this case, literally, what is the value of pointing out that your child is wrong? If your child misunderstood whether there is a like button or a love button or whatever, what difference does it make in their life? None whatsoever. Has no bearing. Doesn't give them better grades, doesn't give them more friends, doesn't make them happier, doesn't do anything for them. And so when you point out, when you stick their nose in and you say, ha, 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 you're wrong, what value does that? It's nothing. It's ego. So when you demonstrate ego, I'm going to point out to you that it's wrong for the sake of it being wrong. It's just ego, and they're going to respond the same way. You're egotistical, they're egotistical. People who are egotistical never admit when they're wrong. And people, when they're egotistical, love to point out and force other people to understand that I am right and you are wrong. So your child is learning exactly what you modeled. Right? It's kind of weird. They don't have a brain that can figure it out. So what do you do in this situation? So what I would sort of recommend is the first thing that you do is you let it go if you don't think that there's real value to it. Second thing that you can do, so once you start letting things go, they'll let things go too as well. As you start being less stubborn and egotistical, your child will be less stubborn and egotistical. Second thing that you can do is you can point out to them, hey, I noticed that you believed really strongly that this was the case. What do you think happened there? Right? So be curious. Don't be accusatory. So it seems like your mind jumped to a conclusion. What happens when our mind jumps to conclusions? Can you pay attention to when I jump to conclusions and what impact that has? So this is a really good technique to use with kids. When you're trying to explain to a kid that what you're doing is wrong, if you're trying to explain to them the principle, don't make them the focus of the mistake. Make you the focus. When I jump to conclusions, what impact does it have on you? Because now you're the one who's making a mistake. And oh my God, the kid loves pointing out, yeah, dad, mom, y'all make this mistake all the time. I hate it when you do this. Oh, interesting. You hate it when I do this? Maybe I should work on it. What do you think? Should you work on it too? Let's work on it together. You stop jumping into conclusions. That'll make you a better parent. Wonderful. And you're modeling for them the right behavior. See, we as parents, when we try to teach lessons, we don't realize, first of all, our kids are modeled after us. They do what we do. So a lot of the mistakes that your child makes, you make too. And let them point out your mistakes. You're going to be showing them humility. You're going to be showing them that, hey, as long as it doesn't matter whether you're a parent or the child, it's not like the parent is right all the time, the child is wrong all the time. Anyone who makes a mistake, and I can correct it too. You're modeling for them so many good things. Humility, flexibility, the logic of it, right? And then you sit down with your child and you say, I'm going to work on this. You should work on it too. We can work on it together. And then you can say, but what if the child doesn't want to work on their part? Wonderful. Fantastic if they don't want to work on it. Then you're going to give them a task to work on. So in this case, there's asynchronous effort. The parent is putting in all the effort. They're going to work on their problems. The child isn't putting in any effort. Wonderful. Let's flip it around. So now I'm going to tell you to work on this thing, but I'm not going to fix it. How does that make you feel? You like that strategy? Wonderful. Let's play with that strategy. I'm just going to tell you 1,000 different things to do. I'm going to continue making the same mistakes, but you have to fix them. That's wonderful. Let's do it. That sounds awesome. I don't ever have to improve, but I can tell you to improve. And oh, wait, if the child rebels against that because that's unfair, holy shit, maybe we should pause as parents and think about whether that's our default position, which is that I as a parent don't need to improve, but you need to fix everything. Right? No, we're not going to do it that way. So if your kid refuses to admit that they're wrong, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. The first is that their brain has developed the capacity for opinions, but has not developed a very robust capacity for critical thinking about their opinions. So this is very normal. Second thing is that oftentimes the stubbornness and the ego is modeled after the parental behavior, which we as parents don't like to admit. Right? So it's the sad truth of it. And the last thing is try to be as forgiving as possible. Try to sort of encourage them to understand the situation. Make yourself a part of the situation. You all should learn things together as parent and child. This is what I found works the best. Is that y'all are learning this together. You're in it together. You're going to practice it. These are all really important. Okay? All right. Let's see if we have time for one more. Video game and parenting. Hello, ex-gamers of Reddit. I've been following this sub ever so often, and this is the first time posting because I need to get this off my chest. I just wanted to give a very brief background of myself. About 3 years ago, I've decided to stop gaming cold turkey. I got rid of my accounts, my rig, anything to do with gaming, and I was done for good. Honestly, I haven't really looked back or ever relapsed into gaming because I moved on to better things and life was good. Fast forward to 3 months ago, my wife and I had our firstborn, and ever since it got me thinking of what kind of father role model I want my son to have. I'm in a dilemma when it comes to gaming. I'm on the fence about whether, as a parent, we should forbid or limit the consumption of gaming. Like setting time limits, or would that help at all, or blocking certain games because they have addictive or manipulative mechanics. In this community, we're all too familiar with the negativity of gaming. As a parent, I do not want my child to follow my footsteps, potentially making the same mistakes and live with regrets in his life. On the other hand, I do not wish to deprive my son from experiencing life to the fullest, and yes, that might include gaming as well. Perhaps more importantly, I do not want him to be left out from his peers because dad didn't let him have an Xbox. If I do allow some access to gaming, is it a good idea to be involved with him in gaming? Perhaps that could be something to bond over. But as an ex-gamer myself, the thought of going back for whatever reason is a little daunting. I might be overthinking it too much because there's a possibility he might not even be interested, but I just want to be prepared. Any parents out there, I would love to hear your thoughts. So this is beautiful. Beautiful post. Sounds like this is a former gaming addict struggling to figure out, should I even expose my kids? Because on the one hand, they can get really addicted to it. On the other hand, I don't want my kid to be left out. Very real concern. Because to deprive your child of gaming in today's day and age is potentially to socially isolate them. So my take on this is that we need to prepare our children for the world that they're going to live in. Why do we teach our kids to look both ways before they cross the street? It's because on the street there are cars. This is the reality of the world, and you should be prepared to live in it. So now the question becomes, how do we prepare our child for a world of invasive technology? Abject restriction, I do not think, is the best way to prepare your child. Right? I think that they're going to use devices at some point, so teaching them how to use a device in a healthy way is the best gift that you can give your child. And you can't teach them how to use it in a healthy way if you don't ever expose them to it. So what I would say, first and foremost, the most important thing to teach them, this parent already knows. I got rid of my accounts, my rig, anything to do with gaming, and I was done for good. Honestly, I haven't really looked back or ever relapsed into gaming, fortunately, because I have moved on to better things and life was good. This is what you need to teach your child. This is our approach at Healthy Gamer. In a nutshell. Build a life that is worth living. Do not rely on video games to be the fundamental source of meeting your psychological needs. And then gaming will not be addictive. You won't even look back. It's not a problem at all. It can then be recreational. So I would say teach your child exactly what you learned as a parent. The other thing to keep in mind is that oftentimes, I would say this is true in like 90% of cases, when I work with kids who have video game addictions, the parents did not understand what they were dealing with. They either thought they understood it really clearly, or they felt completely out of their depth. One of the two. Either I'm sure this is bad, or I have no idea what's going on. There's no middle of the road. Okay, these are the various concerns. It's nuanced. It's complicated. There is no right answer. There is no simple answer. When parents start thinking about gaming this way, this is when they do a good job. It's when parents make a decision and feel like they understand it. You can't predict the future. You don't know what games are going to come out. You don't know what your child is going to be like. You can't know any of that. And yet, when you make your mind up 100% that games are evil and we're going to keep it away, you've run into a mistake. So understanding that you're ignorant is one of the best things that you can do as a parent, because what does this mean psychologically? This means that as you collect new information, you will revise your opinion. As you revise your opinion, you will be closer to the situation at hand, and you will be able to give the best guidance. So what I would encourage for all y'all, and this is what we do here, right, is we try to teach parents how to teach their children how to be healthy gamers. And that's to teach your kid, hey, so games can be fun, but I had trouble. This is what I struggled with. And here's where I am now. I don't even play anymore. So if you want to play a game, right? So like this is the kind of thing where you don't have to expose them right at the very beginning, or you can if you want to. But if you don't want to give them a game, that's fine. When your kid asks for a game, you can say, okay, you want a game because you're feeling left out? Let's talk about it. Let's understand why we haven't given you one so far. Here are the problems that I had. Here are the settings that I'm going to give it to you. Let's think about it. Just because you get one doesn't mean you can play all the time. Right? Have all of those conversations and take it one step at a time. And you don't know what the right answer is. I do think some amount of restriction makes sense in the sense that you don't just give them the game and let them run wild. Right? You teach them, okay, let's think about what's our job as a kid. What are your responsibilities as a child? Having fun is one of them. But these are your responsibilities. Let's understand how games can make our life better and how they can make our life worse. Let's pay attention to the impact of gaming on our own lives. And this is the kind of thing where sometimes my kids will walk up to me and they'll say, hey, Dad, I want to play a board game, but I'm in the middle of a Dota match. And I will say, Daddy's playing right now. And then when we're done, not always, but sometimes I'll have a conversation with them. I'll say, hey, what was it like for you when Daddy was playing a game and you wanted my attention? Okay, so I'm going to work on that. I'm going to try to give you more attention, and I want you to think about that too. I want you to remember what it felt like, because the next time you're playing a game and Daddy wants your attention, what should you do? And the next time Daddy's playing and you want Daddy's attention, what should Daddy do? See, kids understand this stuff really well if you give them the right calm frame of mind. All right, so someone saying, I wasn't allowed games as a kid and now I'm totally addicted in my 30s. I'm a parent? Hell yeah, I'm a parent. I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. Right? So like, I think it's a challenging world that we're raising kids in. It's incredibly challenging. Games are more addictive than they've ever been, and they offer more potential than they've ever offered. See, when I was growing up, gaming was just recreation. Now it's a job. It's an industry. It's a very successful industry. Esports, streaming, so many careers born through gaming. So the world has changed, and we as parents need to change with it. Right? And I don't have all the right answers, but what I can tell you all as someone who struggled with gaming addiction myself, as someone whose parents tried to help me and didn't know how, as someone who has helped hundreds of people with gaming addiction and their parents, help them get to a healthier form of life, and now as a parent who hopefully is raising healthy kids. We'll see, jury's still out. I'm doing the best that I can. It's a challenging world. And here's the problem with gaming, is that gaming is getting more addictive. Every year it's getting more addictive. And the problem with parents is that, like, generally speaking, as a parent, you don't have to start worrying about an addiction until your child is a teenager, historically. This is when kids get into trouble with alcohol, marijuana, take your pick. We've never had to worry about addiction at the age of 2 before. But this is the world that we live in. Right? So as parents, we have to learn about addictions way earlier. We have to be way smarter. We have to pay more attention. The world is demanding more of us. My parents could be relatively AFK when I was 7 or 8 years old, and the consequences weren't that bad. You can't be AFK with your 5-year-old anymore because their brain is wiring. And if it wires with the iPad, if it wires with a heavy amount of technology, that wiring will take a lot of work to rewire. Right? So it's challenging. And the hardest thing as a parent is that even if we live in this world, we don't know what the right answer is. You know, our institutions are not regulating the addictiveness of video games. The only thing that you see is if the game is violent, it says 18 plus. But violence is not the problem. We have plenty of studies that show that playing violent video games does not lead to violent behavior. So here we are regulating video games due to violence. And there's even one study that I looked at that found that kids with sociopathic personality characteristics, which is like a fair amount of them, right? All human beings are a little bit different, actually have a reduction in stress and cortisol levels when they play violent video games. It helps people calm down and behave in a healthier manner in some cases. But this is what we regulate. We don't regulate the addictive potential. And so you can go to your pediatrician. Your pediatrician isn't really going to know what to do unless they're amazing. You can even go to a psychiatrist, and I've heard this story thousands of times, hundreds of times. I went to a psychiatrist or therapist. They diagnosed him with depression. They started him on medication. The gaming is whatever. They're not really addressing that. Right? So it's challenging to be a parent. It's really hard. Whole new thing. No one knows what to do. And yet your child is here and the consequences are high. Because in a year or two, your child, you know, their relationship with gaming will be heavily influenced. So you have to know what to do now. You can't wait 5 years for someone to figure it out. And your parents don't know what to do because it wasn't that invasive when they were growing up. So where do you turn to? No one knows where to go. There's no answer. That's what's hard about being a parent today. Just the things that you have to worry about are just completely different. I want y'all to just think about this for a second. See, when you're a parent and you take your kid to the playground, you see the kids that they play with. But on the internet, you don't get to see that. So on the internet, your kids are playing with whoever. You have no idea. Imagine you're at the playground and a group of like 30-something dudes come and start playing with your 12-year-old kid every single day. Would you be okay with that? This is what happens on the internet. There's no barrier between your child and anyone else. And the interesting thing, it's not that the 30-year-old dudes are bad, right? So when I queue up for a game of Dota, like there's a 15-year-old kid and they've got Dr. K on their team. Hopefully that's not toxic. Who knows? Maybe I'm toxic. Who knows? So it's not that it's bad, right? It's okay for like a 15-year-old to have a friend who's 30 years old. I think that's okay. But the problem is that as parents nowadays, we're not involved in our kids' social lives because it's all on the internet. At the playground, you at least see who they're playing with. You have some awareness. But once the headsets go on and they've got the gaming system in their room and you go out for Valentine's Day with your partner because y'all's sex life is flagging because y'all have 2 young kids, and so you carve out some time to yourself, who are you leaving them alone with on Valentine's Day? You have no idea. Parenting is hard. See, a lot of people in our community, someone's been asking, Dr. K, can you help me? So like, I'm here to help y'all, and I help y'all. I've spent thousands of hours streaming, making videos, whatever. I've been streaming at least basically around 6 hours a week on average since 2019. I've literally made thousands of hours of content to help y'all. These are the people that I haven't helped. That's why I wrote this book. Right? There's a whole generation. In my heart of hearts, why did I write this book? Why didn't I write a book for y'all? I mean, today we're talking about parents, so this is for y'all. It's because if I really stop and think about it, what is the one thing that would fix all of the problems in our community? Or not the one thing, but the biggest thing that would have fixed all of the problems and why we were founded, why we started, why we're here today. It's because our parents didn't know what to do. If our parents had known what to do 20, 30, 40 years ago, we wouldn't be here today. So now the question is, okay, like if I die tomorrow, how can I help? I can help by helping the parents of the next generation. Because the deck is stacked against us, y'all. And I've got 2 more coming, and the next 2 aren't going to be parenting books. The next 2 are for y'all, chat. And if y'all are parents, then this first one's for y'all too. So you get all three. Because parents need it. We need to cut up parents a little slack, okay? I know they're supposed to be responsible and they have to do all the work and all that kind of stuff. I know. I talk about our community as if they're not parents, but there's a ton of parents in our community. That's why we're doing this. We've got some other cool stuff coming for y'all too. So we're going to, I guess we'll take like maybe one or two more questions, and then we're going to call it for the day. Any last questions? How to have hope about being a parent in the is Jen? I don't know. How do you manage ADHD kids who are obese and seek food as their dopamine source? What a great question. I'm going to have to think about that. I will do some research and get back to you, Dr. Goodgame. What a brilliant question. I have an instinctual answer, but I feel like this deserves some research. So I'm going to look into specifically ADHD and obesity. Dr. K is riding the winds of winter. If only I could, chat. Okay. Do I have content for addiction? We have a lot of content about addiction in general, but there's no guide or anything to addiction. Okay. Hello, I'm 15 years old and I believe I have ADHD and attentive type. I've been researching it a lot lately and relating to a lot of stuff about it, but my mom doesn't believe me. What do I do? So this is really common problem where if you're like a teenager and your parents don't believe or listen to you about your mental health. This is tragic in a lot of ways because what you sort of have to do is like become the parent in this situation. And what I mean by that is like start by pretend that you have a kid who's really stubborn and doesn't believe you. How should you approach that as a parent? Right? So you want to start by asking them what we call open-ended questions. And so we teach this stuff like in the book, right? So this is where like, it's a book for parents and their kids, but a lot of the techniques are very useful for situations even like this. Where I would start by asking them questions like, what do you think about ADHD? Do you think it's real? And if they don't think it's real, like what's your understanding of why medical doctors and professionals, like why do they think it's real? What do you think they base that on? So start with really, really open-ended questions, right? So start by what is your understanding of ADHD? Do you think it's real? Do you think it's not real? Why do you think it's real? Why do you think it's not real? Here's the challenge that I'm having, right? So then you can share with them. So there's a chance that I've got ADHD. There's a chance that I don't have ADHD. Now, if you're right and I'm wrong and I don't have ADHD, then, it sounds like nothing needs to be done about it because it's all in my head. I'm just lazy. So there's nothing to do about it. So there's no harm, right? Or there's nothing lost if you're right and I'm wrong. But let's assume that I'm wrong and there are treatments for it and we never pursue them. So this is a situation where if you're wrong and I'm right or medical professionals are correct, that means that the course of my life could be significantly altered. Right? So this is something that could be fixed and may not be addressed. That's what I'm concerned about. And the last thing is I would not try to convince your parents that you have ADHD for any number of reasons. The first of which is that if you're learning about it from the internet, people misrepresent it all the time. So your understanding of it may not be correct. So the goal that you really want to shoot for is encouraging your parents to get an evaluation. Okay, I think I've got it. You think I don't have it. Neither of us is an expert. What do you think about getting an evaluation for ADHD? Let's go talk to someone about it and then let an expert decide. I don't know how to explain this stuff to you. Maybe they'll be able to explain it to you. And if they're resistant to that, then things get very difficult. But I found that about 50 to 75% of kids who approach things from not convincing their parents. See, convincing your parents you have ADHD is a very high barrier. And half the reason that your parents don't believe that you have ADHD is because they have undiagnosed ADHD and they never got diagnosed with it. They were just like you when they were kids. I was exactly the same way, and I grew out of it. I ended up fine. You don't need any diagnosis. You don't need to see a shrink. You don't need to see some fucking person who's going to diagnose you with stuff. And no, that's all BS. I did fine. I ended up okay, and you're the same way. This is the reason why many parents think this way. So convincing them that you have a diagnosis means running up against that psychological pile of crap. Their own struggles when no one was there to help them. Their own frustrations that all comes pouring out. And they built up these hard defense mechanisms to protect themselves in order to survive. And they're going to help you survive too. We're not going to do any of that namby-pamby mental health stuff. So don't try to convince them you have ADHD. Try to advocate for an evaluation. And even if they won't let you see a mental health professional, you should still see a pediatrician. Right? So you, generally speaking, will see a pediatrician. And the next time you see a pediatrician, usually what will happen if you're a teenager is the pediatrician will ask you, hey, is there anything you want to talk to me about in private? Or they should ask your parent to leave the room so they can ask you questions in private. If they ask you to be seen in private, you can say yes. Or if you don't want to ask it in private, you can just even ask them. My mom and I have been discussing recently about like whether I have ADHD or not. I was wondering if I could get an evaluation. Just ask your doctor. Now the ball is in their court. And your parent may jump in and say they don't need an evaluation, but then the medical doctor should do the right thing in that moment. When a child asks for mental health services and a parent says they don't need it, it is the doctor's responsibility to help you. So that's the last thing you can do if no one else, like if your parent is unwilling to listen. Great question. So hard. What's your opinion on parenting differences between cultures? For example, in Japan, parents often sleep with kids until adolescence, while that may be seen as overly dependent in the West. I think there's cultural differences in parenting. So I think generally speaking, I mean, I don't think one is right or wrong. I think that the biggest mistake you can make with cultural parenting is assuming that your parenting is objectively correct because you come from a culture. So that's a mistake that everybody makes. And, you know, I have certain parenting norms and things like that. I also come from a culture where co-sleeping is way more common. So I think it's just different. Like different people have different lives. They have different pressures. So I think it's just, they're different cultures. And I think it's really important to recognize that cultural parenting usually evolves for a reason. It's not that it's objectively correct. It's that whatever parenting styles we have oftentimes succeed in the environment that we have. So in the West, we foster more independence, and independence is important. Kids potentially get kicked out of the house at the age of 18, which means they probably need to start learning independence at the age of 2 or 3. On the flip side, in Eastern cultures, we have more of a community aspect. The individual is not more important than the community or the tribe. And so you have a population like India, like 1.4 billion people, and like people have to learn how to value the community over the individual. So there's just not as much land in India, right? The density of humanity is much greater. Similar thing is true in Japan. So 90% of Japan is like mountain or something like that. I don't know exactly what the statistic is. So you have very densely populated cities, and you have community living is very, very important. That's why everyone's so respectful. Well, it's not why. I mean, it's dense in India as well, but people aren't nearly as respectful. Okay. All right, y'all. Thank you very much for coming today. We've got, I think we're streaming potentially on Wednesday. Stay tuned. And so How to Raise a Healthy Gamer is available for pre-order. Basically anywhere where y'all can find books. So if y'all are interested in learning about, how to raise your kids without, by decreasing the risk of technology addiction, how to teach them a healthy relationship with gaming, definitely pick it up. If y'all have a kid who is a little bit older and you need to like really work on what you think is an addiction, there's a lot of good stuff in there. And then in general, I think the book is also teaches our fundamentals of communication. So if y'all are like not in either of these situations, but you have a spouse or sibling who struggles with gaming, that can be very helpful. And then the last thing is there's just a lot of general communication stuff that is really good that applies to stuff outside of gaming. So the frame of the book is going to be a little bit off, but the techniques are still very, very solid. Estimated release date is March 12th. So thank you all very much for coming today, and we will catch y'all. Oh, so just a reminder that if y'all pre-order, we're going to have a couple of special bonuses for y'all. One is you get a chapter of the audiobook, which is read by yours truly. And then we are also having a special Q&A for people who pre-order. So we recognize that the book covers a lot of ground, but there are a lot of edge cases that may not be covered. So if y'all have a specific question, then please ask it, and then we'll sort of get around to it. Okay? The pre-order now button doesn't work, by the way. Okay, great to know. Thank you so much. We are still scuffed. Thank you so much, chat. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your help, all the questions that y'all ask, all of your participation. And I'm going to look into a video about ADHD and obesity. So thank you very much for the person who asked that question. So for people who are asking, how can they contact me? I don't generally speaking I don't answer questions directly for the most part. And the reason for that is very simple. It's because any question that I answer, hopefully other people can benefit from. So if I have a choice, like, you know, if people ask me like private questions, I could theoretically answer them, but then I couldn't answer public questions, and that would only benefit the person that is asking the question. So I'm all for getting your questions. So we have everything from, you know, live streams like this. Y'all can post things on our subreddit. There's a chance that I'll get around to it. We also have some other places, like we've got a community space where questions get asked, that y'all can ask questions. We also have opportunities like this with the pre-order where there's a lot of spaces where we receive questions from y'all. So, yeah. Okay.